Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to focus our attention on Phil Town and his Rule 1 portfolio as of the end of Q4 2022. So it just came out this past week. It typically comes out about 6 weeks after the quarter. If you don't know much about Phil Town, he's written a couple of books. He has a YouTube channel. He's got a podcast. He is a value investor. In fact, I took his investing course over 3 years ago, and I do like how he looks at stocks, how he analyzes stocks. So I kind of like to see what he's doing each single quarter. In fact, what I like to do is break down the video into 3 different sections. So one is, what does his portfolio look like at the end of the quarter? Were there any changes in his portfolio? Did he sell stocks, buy stocks, that sort of thing? And then number 2, which is my favorite part, is looking at his options contracts. Did he buy or sell any calls or puts during the month, or any credit spreads? He may do that as well too, but it gives us a good indicator if there's a particular stock he likes and at what price he likes it at. And there's a new one that showed up that really surprised me over Q4, which we'll talk about in this video. And the third is, how is his portfolio performing against the S&P 500? So I track it every single month. So we're going to look at the entire year of 2022. How did he perform against S&P 500? Because I'm going to follow him. I respect what he does. I want to see him beat the market over the long term. Now, a 1-year track record is not long enough. We got to see several years, 10 years worth of data. So I started tracking that at the beginning of 2022. So we'll just kind of see where that goes going into the future as well. So what I'm going to do is start out with is actually see what his portfolio is doing for returns for 2022. Then we'll do options and then what happened in his portfolio. So let's look at his returns for the fourth quarter right now. So you can see this chart up on your screen right now for Q4 2022. You can see the blue is his portfolio, the Rule 1 fund, and then the orange is S&P 500. And so you can kind of see how his portfolio did and S&P 500 did over the quarter. So for example, in October, his portfolio did about 5% return, while S&P 500 did 8%. November, he was up 2%. S&P 500 was up 6%. He was down 3% in December, while S&P 500 was down 6% in November. So how did his portfolio do over the entire year of 2022? So let's take a look at that right now. So you can see this chart right here. His portfolio was down 8% in 2022, while the S&P 500 was down 18% during 2022. So keep in mind, it was not a good year for investors just in general. There were a lot of things that occurred in 2022 that were out of our control as investors. You look at the economy, you look at inflation really roared up. You have the interest rate hikes by the Feds, which the market doesn't like overall. If you look at that Ukrainian war, that's still continuing. That started, I believe, in February 2022. So there's a lot of stuff that happened in 2022, which drove down the markets overall. So, when I look at his portfolio, and we'll take a look at it more in depth here in a little bit, but he has tended to hold a lot of cash in his portfolio since he began holding this fund back in 2019, I believe. So because he's holding so much cash, around a third or more typically is what I've seen, I would expect during a bull market when the stock market's doing really well, his fund is not going to do as well because he's holding a lot of cash. However, the reverse of that, when the market is doing poorly, like we saw in 2022, I would expect his portfolio not to lose as much money. And that's what we saw. So his portfolio lost less than half of what the S&P 500 did in 2022. When I say less than half, his was down 8%, S&P 500 was down 18%. So 10% better return than what the S&P 500 had done. But it was still negative, but definitely better than what the market did overall. All right, so the next section I want to talk about, and it's my favorite one, is the options contract. So why do I like looking at this within his portfolio? Well, it gives a good indicator if there's a new stock that he likes and potentially at what price that he may like it at. And when I went through his portfolio on the SEC.gov website, it's a really pain to go through it, just the format. I did find a couple of different option contracts out there. 2 of them were on Goldman Sachs, ticker symbol GS. Now, he really likes Goldman Sachs. He has owned it before. And so he had option contracts where he sold some puts at a strike price of $310 and a strike price of $315. If you know much about Phil Town, he likes to buy stocks at a 50% margin of safety. So in general, that could indicate that he thinks that the stock may be worth $600 a share. That seems kind of a stretch when I look at Goldman Sachs, but he does like that stock a lot. He likes that company a lot. When the whole market crashed back in March 2020, that was one of the stocks I picked up and did pretty well on, ended up selling, and looks like maybe he wants back in that stock. But the one that really stood out to me, and it was a brand new stock that showed up, was Apple, ticker symbol AAPL. I was really surprised to see that. I do listen to his podcast now and then, do watch his YouTube videos, and I don't remember him mentioning Apple. So if you follow him closer even than I do, and he's been mentioning Apple, throw it in the comment section. But that one showed up. So he sold some put options on Apple at a strike price of $127. Now, Goldman Sachs, Apple, they all expired on January 13th. And I went back and I looked. It does not look like any of these stocks would have been put to him. Apple got really close. Really, really close. It got down to less than $130 a share at the beginning of January, during the first week of January, somewhere around there. So it's close that he may have got put, but I don't think that he owns those shares right now, unless he went out and bought those directly, say in Q1. We'll have to see how that kind of played out there. But that was interesting to me. I did not really expect that. Now, Warren Buffett is probably the biggest proponent for Apple. He owns, I think, 40% of his portfolio in Apple right now, and he's continued to buy Apple. So for me, when I look at Apple, it does, I mean, I love the company. It just, from a valuation standpoint, I have a hard time buying it. I don't think it's a really great value right now. I think it's closer to fair value. But, if you do think it's going to grow 10 to 15% per year of the stock, then, maybe it's worth it. I don't know. But it's certainly a great company overall. All right. So now the third part I want to talk about is, what does his portfolio look like right now? Were there any changes to his portfolio? Was he buying or selling? So I'm just going to throw up his portfolio on the screen right now. And really the best way to illustrate it is on this pie chart. And what we do is look at, really, if you look at the top left section, that is the biggest portion of his portfolio, and it's cash, 25%. And he's had cash all the way up to 40% in his portfolio. And as you go to the right, the positions get smaller. So you have Netflix, which is his biggest stock that he owns, at 19% of his portfolio. Netflix has a pretty good run over the last quarter and a half. So it has grown in his portfolio. Banco ZK is 15%, Activision Blizzard 13%, Sprouts at 8%, Huntington Ingalls at 7%, Alphabet, also known as Google, 5%, Armada Hoffler is at 4%, Sturman Ruger is at 3%, and then he's got some silver ETFs at 1%. So interesting, he didn't sell or buy any stock during the quarter, which was unusual. You see him at least, potentially sell a stock. I think he had some call options, I want to say, last quarter as well. So none of those obviously got called away from him, because he still owns all the stock. And really the only change that he technically had in his portfolio is that his cash position was slightly reduced over the quarter. So I don't know if he was pulling money out. I know for me, when I have options and I go and say sell put options, that still shows as cash in my portfolio. So it's interesting. So maybe he had some people, pulling money out. And so he had to, pull from his cash. I'm not quite sure, but I thought that was kind of interesting overall, and not to see any selling or buying overall was interesting in general. So, I would love to hear from you guys. What do you think about his portfolio right now? What do you think about 2022, him being down 8% versus the market being down 18%? How do you think his portfolio is going to do going into 2023? Do you think he owns Apple right now? Do you think those options actually got put to him? Be curious to hear what you guys had to say. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll catch you guys on the other side. Take care and God bless.